Welcome back to the channel, and today we are diving deep into The Boss Baby, Family Business, an American computer animated comedy film that was produced by DreamWorks Animation and distributed worldwide by Universal Pictures. This film was made in the United States, developed at DreamWorks Animation Studio in Glendale, with some additional production work handled by Jellyfish Pictures, and it stands as the second installment in the Boss Baby franchise, serving as a direct sequel to the very successful 2017 film The Boss Baby. The movie is loosely based on the beloved picture books written by Marla Frazee, The Boss Baby and its follow-up The Bossier Baby, and it was helmed once again by director Tom McGrath, the same filmmaker who brought the original Boss Baby and the hit film Megamind to life. The screenplay for the sequel was written by Michael McCullers, while the story itself was crafted jointly by McGrath and McCullers, ensuring that the tone, humor, and heart of the franchise remained consistent while pushing the narrative into new and unexpected territory. In some international territories, the film was released under the alternate title The Boss Baby 2, making it easier for global audiences to recognize it as a continuation of the original story. Now let's talk about the overview of this animated adventure. The Boss Baby, Family Business picks up several years after the events of the first movie, and it explores what happens when childhood adventures fade into adult responsibilities. The film blends comedy, heartfelt family drama, and imaginative fantasy elements, all wrapped inside DreamWorks Animation's signature colorful and energetic visual style. It was scored by the legendary Hans Zimmer alongside Steve Mazzaro, giving the movie an emotionally rich musical backdrop that elevates both its comedic set pieces and its more touching family moments. With a runtime of 107 minutes, the film was produced on a budget of $82 million, and it eventually grossed around $146 million at the worldwide box office, though it received a mixed to negative response from critics upon release. With many praising its animation, let's move into the plot now, because this is where the real magic of the story unfolds. The film is set decades after the first movie, and we find that Tim Templeton, who was once a 7-year-old boy with an overactive imagination, is now fully grown, married, and living a quiet suburban life. Tim has become a devoted stay-at-home father, while his once tiny baby brother Ted, who was secretly a top agent for the mysterious organization known as BabyCorp, has grown up to become a wealthy and successful hedge fund CEO. Over the years, the bond that once made these two brothers inseparable has faded, and they have drifted apart, each caught up in their own very different adult lives. Tim now shares his home with his wife Carol and their two daughters, 7-year-old Tabitha, who is an extraordinarily gifted and hardworking student, and an adorable infant daughter named Tina. Tabitha attends an elite and prestigious institution called the Acorn Center for Advanced Childhood, a school that prides itself on shaping the world's most exceptional young minds, and she deeply admires her Uncle Ted, dreaming of following in his ambitious footsteps. This worries Tim, who fears that his daughter is missing out on the simple joys of everything. Changes when the family discovers a shocking secret. Baby Tina is not just an ordinary infant. She is actually a highly trained undercover agent working for BabyCorp, following in the footsteps of her Uncle Ted from the earlier film. Tina reveals that she has been sent on an important covert mission to investigate the Acorn Center and its enigmatic founder, a charismatic yet suspicious genius named Dr. Erwin Armstrong. As the family digs deeper, they uncover a sinister plan orchestrated by Armstrong, one that threatens to erase the innocence and wonder of childhood not just for Tabitha, but for children all across the world. In order to stop this looming threat, Tim and Ted are forced to reunite, temporarily transforming back into their younger selves through a special formula so they can go undercover and infiltrate Armstrong's operation from the inside. This magical transformation allows the estranged brothers to relive their childhood adventures together, giving them the opportunity to reconnect, heal old wounds, and rediscover the powerful bond they once shared. Along the way, the story balances high-energy action, comedic espionage sequences, and genuinely touching moments about family, parenthood, growing up, and learning to appreciate the people who matter most. As the mission intensifies, Tim and Ted must work together as a united family business, combining Tim's boundless imagination with Ted's sharp strategic mind, all while Tina orchestrates the operation from behind the scenes with her signature confidence and charm. The climax of the film brings the entire Templeton family together in a heartfelt and action-packed showdown against Dr. Armstrong. Now let's talk about the incredible voice cast that brought this story to life. Alec Baldwin returns to lend his unmistakable voice to Ted Templeton, the now grown adult version of the original Boss Baby, bringing his signature blend of sharp wit and commanding presence to the role. James Marsden takes over the role of the adult Tim Templeton, stepping into a part that captures both the whimsical imagination of the character and the emotional weight of fatherhood. Amy Sedaris voices the new baby of the family, Tina Templeton, who moonlights as the newest secret agent for BabyCorp, bringing playful energy and comedic charm to the character. Ariana Greenblatt voices Tabitha, the brilliant and driven young daughter of Tim and Carol, whose storyline forms much of the emotional core of the film. Jeff Goldblum joins the cast as the film's central antagonist, Dr. Owen Armstrong, bringing his unmistakable and eccentric vocal style to a villain whose intelligence is matched only by his ambition. Eva Longoria voices Carol Templeton, Tim's supportive and capable wife, while Jimmy Kimmel and Lisa Kudrow both return from the original film. When it comes to the release date, The Boss Baby, Family Business had a rather complicated journey to theaters due to the disruptions caused by the global pandemic during that period. The film was originally scheduled to premiere on March 26, 2021, but due to ongoing uncertainty in the film industry at the time, it was pushed back to September 17, 2021. However, as circumstances shifted, Universal Pictures decided to move the release date forward once again, and the film finally arrived in North American theaters on July 2, 2021. This release was particularly notable because it marked the first time a Boss Baby film was distributed by Universal Pictures, and it also became Universal's very first film to be released simultaneously in theaters and on the streaming platform Peacock, where it was available to paid subscribers for a period of 60 days following its theatrical debut. The film was shown in stand. As for the trailer, the marketing campaign for The Boss Baby, Family Business rolled out across various platforms throughout the months leading up to its release, giving fans a first look at the grown-up versions of Tim and Ted, the introduction of baby Tina as a secret agent, and glimpses of Jeff Goldblum's mysterious and eccentric villain character. The trailers leaned heavily into the comedic contrast between the brothers' very different adult lives, while also teasing the nostalgic transformation sequence that would bring them back into their younger forms for their spy mission together. These promotional videos successfully captured the blend of humor, heart, and family adventure that longtime fans of the franchise had come to expect, while also introducing new audiences to the expanding world of BabyCorp and its the complete story of The Boss Baby, Family Business, walking through every major beat of the movie from beginning to end so that you understand exactly how the plot unfolds and why every character makes the choices they make throughout this heartfelt animated adventure. The story opens roughly 3 decades after the events of the very first Boss Baby film, and we are introduced to a grown-up version of Tim Templeton, the same boy who once shared his childhood home with a mysterious talking infant in a business suit. Tim is now a fully matured adult, and rather than chasing corporate ambition the way his younger brother once predicted he might, Tim has settled into the role of a warm, imaginative, and deeply devoted stay-at-home father. He lives a comfortable suburban life alongside his wife Carol, a hardworking and supportive woman who serves as the primary breadwinner of the household. Together they are raising 2 daughters who could not be more different from one another. The eldest, Tabitha, is 7 years old and possesses an extraordinary intellect, excelling academically in ways that make her parents proud yet also slightly concerned. Meanwhile, Tim's younger brother Ted has grown into a wildly successful hedge fund CEO. Where Tim chose warmth, imagination, and presence, Ted chose ambition, wealth, and constant movement. He is almost never physically present in his brother's life anymore, instead choosing to express his affection through extravagant and often impersonal gifts that he sends from wherever his business empire currently has him stationed. This growing emotional distance between the two brothers forms one of the central emotional threads of the entire film. Once inseparable as children, sharing secret missions and imaginative escapades together, Tim and Ted have drifted into two completely different adult worlds, and the warmth that once defined their relationship. As the story progresses, Tim begins to notice troubling changes in his daughter Tabitha. She seems to be growing up far too quickly, trading the carefree wonder of childhood for an intense, almost obsessive focus on academic achievement and personal advancement. Tabitha attends a highly prestigious educational institution known as the Acorn Center for Advanced Childhood, a school that markets itself as a place where gifted children can reach their fullest potential. Tabitha adores this school, and she especially idolizes her successful Uncle Ted, dreaming of one day becoming just as powerful and accomplished as he is. Tim watches with growing unease as his daughter drifts away from playful, imaginative childhood and toward a hyper-competitive, achievement-obsessed mindset, and he cannot quite figure out why this transformation is happening so rapidly or so intensely. One evening, while Tim is quietly processing his worries about the kind of person his daughter is becoming, he hears strange and unexpected sounds coming from baby Tina's nursery. Curious and slightly alarmed, he creeps down the hallway to investigate, and what he discovers completely upends everything he thought he knew about his family. Baby Tina is not simply an ordinary infant. She is, in fact, a fully trained secret agent working for the shadowy and powerful organization known as BabyCorp, the very same organization that once employed Ted during his own secret mission decades earlier. Tina reveals that she has been specifically assigned to bring her father and her uncle. Tim, still reeling with disbelief and instinctively protective of his family's peaceful, ordinary existence, firmly refuses to get involved. He tells Tina in no uncertain terms that he wants nothing to do with secret missions or espionage, that those days belong to his childhood, and that he has no intention of dragging his brother back into this world either. He insists that Ted will never agree to come, and he sends Tina back to bed, believing the matter to be settled. However, baby Tina, displaying the same cunning resourcefulness that once defined her Uncle Ted as an infant secret agent, secretly leaves a cleverly disguised voicemail message on Ted's phone, one that appears to come from Tim himself, urgently inviting Ted to come to the house right away. The very next morning, Tim is stunned to find a visibly concerned Ted standing at his front door, having rushed over immediately after receiving what he believed was an urgent message from his brother. Confused and slightly annoyed, Tim tries to explain the bizarre situation unfolding in his household, revealing to Ted that baby Tina is secretly a boss baby, just as Ted himself once was many years earlier. Ted, having long ago lost his childhood memories of his own secret agent days, reacts with total disbelief, assuming his brother has simply lost his mind. The two brothers begin bickering in the kitchen, their old sibling tension bubbling immediately to the surface, each one frustrated with how distant and different the other has become over the years. Their argument is abruptly interrupted when baby Tina dramatically reveals her true identity right there in the kitchen, proving to both stunned brothers that she really is a fully operational BabyCorp agent. She produces a pair of special magic pacifiers and hands one to each brother, along with an important item that BabyCorp scientists have specifically developed for this mission, a revolutionary formula capable of temporarily transforming grown adults back into their 7-year-old selves for a period of exactly 48 hours. This astonishing transformation is designed to give Tim and Ted the ability to go completely undercover inside Tabitha's school, allowing them to investigate what is really happening behind the polished, prestigious exterior of the Acorn Center for Advanced Childhood, and more specifically, to uncover the true intentions of its enigmatic founder and principal, the brilliant yet deeply suspicious Dr. Owen Armstrong. Reluctantly, and somewhat chaotically, the brothers agreed to take on this bizarre mission together, drinking the formula and transforming back into their childhood selves. The very next morning, Disguised once again as children, Tim follows his daughter Tabitha into her classroom, hoping to observe the school's inner workings firsthand and figure out what could possibly be causing such an alarming shift in his daughter's personality. Meanwhile, young Ted is placed among a group of infants in the school's baby care section, forced to blend in with actual babies despite being, on the inside, a fully grown and highly experienced adult businessman. Tim, on the other hand, takes a very different approach to gaining access to restricted areas of the school. Determined to get close enough to uncover the truth, he deliberately begins misbehaving and causing disruptions in his classroom, hoping that his bad behavior will get him sent to the principal's office where he can confront Armstrong directly. His plan does not go quite as intended, however, and instead of landing in the principal's office, Tim finds himself placed inside a strange and unsettling disciplinary chamber known simply as the box, a small enclosed timeout space used by the school to punish. Meanwhile, as Ted continues sneaking through the school's hidden corridors, he stumbles upon a shocking and pivotal discovery. Dr. Owen Armstrong, the seemingly brilliant and respected founder of this elite academic institution, is not actually an adult at all. He is, in truth, a baby himself, an extraordinarily intelligent infant who ran away from his own family many years ago after coming to the unsettling realization that he was far more intelligent than his own parents. Rather than accepting a life where he had to obey adults he considered intellectually inferior, Armstrong chose to abandon his family entirely, eventually building an empire of wealth and influence through the creation of wildly popular smartphone applications, all while maintaining the illusion of being a full-grown adult professional. Ted also uncovers Armstrong's true master plan, an operation he refers to as B-Day, a coordinated global event designed to eliminate the influence of parents entirely. As the mission unfolds, communication with BabyCorp headquarters becomes increasingly difficult, and baby Tina grows frustrated watching her father and uncle slip right back into their old patterns of arguing and drifting apart, even while working side by side on such a critical mission. In a moment of dramatic frustration, Tina makes a bold and symbolic gesture, announcing that she is quitting the mission altogether and declaring that if the brothers truly want to succeed, they will need to find a way to complete this mission entirely on their own, without her constant intervention, forcing them to rely. The tension and stakes of the story reach their peak on the night of the school's much-anticipated holiday pageant, an event where Tabitha is scheduled to perform a solo musical number in front of the entire community. During the event, Ted finds himself socializing with Dr. Armstrong in an exclusive VIP section reserved for special guests, and it is here that the true horrifying scope of Armstrong's plan is finally revealed. B-Day is set to be triggered that very night through Armstrong's massively popular smartphone application known as Cutie Snap, a program that, unbeknownst to millions of unsuspecting, before they can intervene, both Tim and Ted are captured by Armstrong's fiercely loyal squad of ninja-trained infant enforcers and thrown into the box, the very same disciplinary chamber Tim had been placed in earlier. This time, however, the stakes are far higher, as the brothers watch in horror as the chamber slowly begins filling with water, threatening to drown them both unless they can find a way to escape in time. In this desperate, life-threatening moment, trapped together and facing what feels like certain doom, the emotional walls between Tim and Ted finally begin to crumble. Stripped of distractions, business meetings, and adult responsibilities, the two brothers finally open up to one another honestly, addressing years of unspoken resentment, distance, and misunderstanding. While all of this unfolds behind the scenes, Tabitha steps onto the stage and delivers a beautiful, heartfelt solo performance during the pageant, unaware of the chaos happening elsewhere in the building. However, when she finishes her performance and looks out into the audience searching for her father, she is devastated to discover that Tim is nowhere to be found, and worse, that every single parent in the audience appears frozen and unresponsive, having already fallen under the hypnotic influence of Armstrong's Cutie Snap signal. Overwhelmed with confusion and heartbreak, Tabitha runs off the stage in tears, believing she has been abandoned. It is in this emotional moment that baby Tina finally reveals the truth of her secret identity to her older sister, comforting her and explaining everything that has been happening. Rather than reacting with anger or disbelief, Tabitha immediately agrees to join her baby sister on a daring mission to reach the school's central server room and shut down Cutie Snap before its hypnotic signal can spread across the entire world. Back inside the flooding disciplinary chamber, Ted manages to use a special summoning device to call for help from Precious, Tabitha's beloved pet pony, who dramatically bursts into the school and breaks Tim and Ted free from the box just moments before it would have been too late. The moment they escape, the brothers are immediately confronted by Armstrong's ninja infant squad, but thanks to the loyalty Ted earned earlier from the other babies in the playroom, they receive crucial backup, allowing them to fight their way through the opposition and continue their mission. Racing against time, Tim and Ted arrive at the server room first, only to be intercepted by Dr. Armstrong himself, who desperately calls upon the hypnotized, zombie-like parents to serve as his personal enforcers against the brothers. As Tim and Ted work together to hold off this bizarre army of mind-controlled adults, Tina and Tabitha make their way up to the actual server terminal, working together as sisters for the very first time on a mission of enormous importance. Tabitha, drawing on the very same intelligence and skill that once made her so proud to attend Armstrong's school, successfully hacks into the system and manages to pull up the shutdown screen needed to stop B-Day before it can be triggered worldwide. In a moment of pure villainous desperation, Armstrong smashes the keyboard, destroying their ability to type in the final shutdown command through conventional means. Refusing to give up, the two sisters improvise an ingenious and wildly chaotic solution, using ordinary Mentos candies combined with soda to trigger a massive, explosive chemical reaction, essentially creating a candy-powered volcano that completely destroys Armstrong's server equipment, permanently shutting down Cutie Snap and instantly breaking the hypnotic spell holding all of the parents in the auditorium. As the parents regain consciousness and return to their senses, completely unaware of the danger they had just been in, the immediate crisis comes to an end. In the emotional aftermath of this wild adventure, it is finally revealed that baby Tina's true, deeper mission was never really about stopping Armstrong at all, at least not primarily. Her real and most important objective all along was to find a way to bring her father and her uncle back together, repairing the broken bond between two brothers who had drifted so far apart over the years. Having succeeded not only in saving the world from Armstrong's scheme but also in mending her own family, Tina watches with quiet satisfaction as Tim and Ted embrace one another, finally reconciled, ready to move forward as a truly united family. The Templeton family comes together to celebrate Christmas as one united household, filled with warmth, laughter, and renewed closeness. Even Dr. Armstrong experiences a meaningful change of heart by the end of the story, ultimately choosing to abandon his cold, ambition-driven lifestyle and return home to reunite with the very family he once ran away from, finally allowing. That is the complete story of The Boss Baby, family business from beginning to end, a wildly imaginative, emotionally rich animated adventure that reminds us all that growing up does not have to mean growing apart from the people we love most. We begin with Alec Baldwin, the actor who lends his voice to the adult version of Ted Templeton. Alec Baldwin was born on April 3, 1958, in Amityville, New York, and was raised nearby in the town of Massapequa as the eldest of 6 children in a family devoted to education. His father worked as a high school teacher and football coach, while his mother managed the household, and Baldwin grew up in a devout Catholic family where discipline and structure were part of everyday life. As a teenager, he attended Alfred G. Burner High School, where he played football and first began exploring his interest in performance through school plays. After graduating, Baldwin enrolled at George Washington University with plans to study political science and eventually pursue law school, but his childhood fascination with acting resurfaced during his college years and pulled him in an entirely different direction. He transferred to New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, where he studied drama and eventually became associated with the prestigious Actors Studio and the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute. While building his acting foundation, Baldwin supported himself with odd jobs, including working as a busboy at the famously glamorous nightclub Studio 54 in New York City, immersing himself in the city's vibrant creative scene while chasing his first real break. That break came in 1980 when he landed the role of Billy Aldrich on the daytime soap opera The Doctors, a part he played for 2 years while simultaneously performing in stage productions of Shakespeare in the evenings, showing an incredible work ethic even in his earliest days as a professional actor. He made his Broadway debut in 1986, and not long after transitioned into primetime television with a role in the nighttime soap opera Knots Landing, which helped introduce him to a much wider audience. His feature film debut came in 1987, and within just a couple of years he was appearing in major Hollywood productions such as Beetlejuice, Married to the Mob, and Working Girl, quickly proving his versatility across genres ranging from horror comedy to serious drama. In 1990, Baldwin took on the iconic role of Jack Ryan in The Hunt for Red October, based on the espionage novels of Tom Clancy, cementing his status as a leading man capable of carrying big-budget thrillers. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, he continued building an impressively diverse filmography, appearing in Glengarry Glen Ross, The Aviator, and The Departed, while also becoming a familiar face on Saturday Night Live, where his frequent hosting appearances and sharp comedic timing eventually earned him an Emmy Award. His career reached a particularly celebrated peak between 2006 and 2013 when he starred as the arrogant yet oddly likable television executive Jack Donaghy on the acclaimed sitcom 30 Rock, a role that showcased his comedic gifts and earned him multiple Emmy Awards along with widespread critical praise. Baldwin also continued to work steadily in film during this period, appearing in projects like It's Complicated alongside Meryl Streep and collaborating with acclaimed director Woody Allen on films such as To Rome with Love and Blue Jasmine. As the oldest of the famous Baldwin acting family, which also includes his brothers Daniel, William, and Stephen, Alec has long been recognized as the most accomplished and widely known member of the family, and beyond acting he has also worked as an author, a podcast host, and a vocal advocate for various political and social causes throughout his public life. Moving on to James Marsden, who provides the voice for the adult version of Tim Templeton in this film, we find a very different upbringing rooted in the American heartland. James Paul Marsden was born on September 18, 1973, in Stillwater, Oklahoma, to a father who worked as a professor and food safety advisor and a mother who worked as a nutritionist. He was raised alongside 4 siblings, and his parents divorced when he was only 9 years old, an experience that shaped his early years even as he continued to thrive academically and socially. Marsden attended Putnam City North High School in Oklahoma City, where a 10th grade drama class, one his mother encouraged him to join, first sparked his passion for acting and performance. After graduating in 1991, he enrolled at Oklahoma State University to study broadcast journalism, believing at the time that this would be his career path, and he even joined the Delta Tau Delta fraternity during his time there. However, a chance encounter during a family vacation to Hawaii changed the course of his life entirely, when he happened to meet actor Kirk Cameron and his sister Candace Cameron, who invited him to visit Los Angeles. Inspired by this connection and increasingly drawn to performing after appearing in stage productions like Bye Bye Birdie, Marsden ultimately left college after about a year and a half to pursue acting professionally, moving to Los Angeles to chase his dream. His earliest acting work included guest appearances on television shows such as Saved by the Bell, The New Class, Touched by an Angel, and Party of Five, along with a recurring role on the sitcom The Nanny. His major breakthrough arrived in the early 2000s when he was cast as Scott Summers, also known as Cyclops, in the immensely popular X-Men film franchise, a role that introduced him to global audiences and established him as a bankable star in big-budget cinema. That same period saw him take on a wide variety of roles, starring in the romantic drama The Notebook, playing Superman's rival in Superman Returns, and demonstrating his musical talents in the beloved film adaptation of Hairspray, for which he actually recorded songs that were certified platinum. He continued to build a diverse career throughout the following years, appearing in the romantic comedy 27 Dresses, the Disney musical Enchanted, and later taking on more dramatic and prestige projects, including a portrayal of President John F. Kennedy in the film The Butler. In more recent years, Marsden has become known to television audiences for his acclaimed performances in the science fiction series Westworld and the dark comedy series Dead to Me, further proving his range as a performer capable of moving. Next, let's explore the fascinating life of Amy Sedaris, who brings her distinctive comedic energy to the voice of baby Tina Templeton, the newest secret agent of the Templeton family. Amy Louise Sedaris was born on March 29, 1961, in Endicott, New York, to parents Lou and Sharon Sedaris, and she was raised primarily in Raleigh, North Carolina, alongside a large group of siblings that included her older brother David Sedaris, who would go on to become one of America's most beloved humorist authors. Growing up in a household clearly overflowing with wit and creative energy, Amy attended Jesse O. Sanderson High School in Raleigh, and after graduating she chose not to pursue a traditional college education. Instead, at the urging of her brother David, she made the bold decision to relocate to Chicago in the mid-1980s, a city known for its rich comedic tradition. There, she immersed herself in the legendary training grounds of the Second City and the Annoyance Theater, honing her improvisational and sketch comedy skills alongside performers who would go on to become some of the biggest names in American comedy. During this formative period, she supported herself through various odd jobs, including working as a cocktail waitress, and she has spoken candidly about the eccentric and unconventional path that led her toward a career defined by fearless, offbeat humor. Sedaris eventually rose to widespread recognition for creating and starring in the cult classic Comedy Central series Strangers with Candy, in which she portrayed Jerry Blank, a middle-aged former addict returning to high school, a role so bizarre and specific that it became the defining showcase of her singular comedic voice. Beyond this signature role, she has built an extensive career as both a performer and a writer, frequently collaborating with her brother David on stage plays produced under the name The Talent Family. Her film credits span an impressive range, including appearances in Elf, School of Rock, and Shrek the Third, while her television work has included memorable turns in Sex and the City, Monk, and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, as well as voicing the beloved character Princess Carolyn in the acclaimed animated series BoJack Horseman. In more recent years, she has also created and hosted the surreal lifestyle and comedy program At Home with Amy Sedaris, blending her love of crafting and homemaking with her signature absurdist humor, further cementing her reputation as one of the most delightfully strange and creative voices working in American comedy today. Now let's turn to young Ariana Greenblatt, who voices the sharp and driven Tabitha Templeton in this film. Ariana Marley Greenblatt was born on August 27, 2007, in New York City, into a family deeply connected to the world of entertainment and performance. Her father, Sean, works as an actor, producer, and director, and also founded a music video production studio, while her paternal grandparents were celebrated Tony Award-winning Broadway musical producers, meaning Ariana was quite literally born into a household steeped in show business tradition. Her mother brings Puerto Rican heritage into the family, blending with her father's Jewish-American background to give Ariana a rich and multicultural upbringing that spanned time in both New York City and Parkland, Florida. From a very young age, Ariana showed a natural passion for performing, taking dance classes and reveling in opportunities to be in the spotlight, and her family's connections to the entertainment industry helped open early doors for her. At just 6 years old, during a family vacation to Los Angeles, her parents decided to schedule some auditions, setting into motion what would become a remarkably fast-rising acting career. She made her first on-screen appearance in an episode of the Disney series Liv and Maddie, and her true breakthrough came shortly after when she was cast in a starring role on the Disney Channel sitcom Stuck in the Middle, playing the youngest sibling in a large, chaotic family, a role that ran from 2016 to 2018 and introduced her to a devoted young audience. From there, her career expanded rapidly into feature films, beginning with a role in the comedy A Bad Mom's Christmas, followed by a scene-stealing appearance as the young version of Gamora in the Marvel blockbuster Avengers: Infinity War, a performance that introduced her to a massive global audience at just 10 years old. She continued building an impressively varied filmography throughout her early teenage years, appearing in the musical adaptation In the Heights, the family drama The One and Only Ivan, and the post-apocalyptic comedy Love and Monsters, while also lending her voice to the character of young Velma Dinkley in the animated film Scoop. Her role as Tabitha Templeton in The Boss Baby Family Business further showcased her range, and she would go on to reprise the character in the franchise's continuation. In the years following this film, Greenblatt has continued to rise rapidly within the industry, earning a growing list of industry recognitions and honors celebrating her as one of the most promising. Let's now look at the remarkable career of Jeff Goldblum, who brings his unmistakable voice and eccentric charm to the film's central antagonist, Dr. Irwin Armstrong. Jeffrey Lynn Goldblum was born on October 22, 1952, in the Pittsburgh area of Pennsylvania, to a father who worked as a physician and a mother who worked in radio broadcasting and later in appliance sales, giving him an early exposure to both intellectual rigor and creative expression. Growing up in a Jewish household with several siblings, Goldblum has often described how both of his parents had, in his own words, flirted with show business earlier in their lives, and he developed his own fascination with performance largely through countless childhood hours spent at the local movie theater, absorbing the era's larger-than-life cinematic spectacles. Though he kept his passion for acting relatively private during his early adolescence, he eventually pursued formal training, and at just 17 years old he made the bold decision to move to New York City to chase a career in acting. Once there, he studied under the renowned acting teacher Sanford Meisner, developing the naturalistic and detail-oriented approach that would come to define his performances. He spent his early 20s performing in various Broadway and off-Broadway productions before catching the attention of legendary director Robert Altman, who cast him in small roles in the films California Split and Nashville, giving Goldblum his first real foothold in the film industry. Throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, he continued building his career with notable appearances in films such as Annie Hall and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, gradually establishing himself as a distinctive and memorable screen presence known for his unusual cadence and offbeat charisma. His career reached a major turning point in 1986 when he took on the lead role in the science fiction horror film The Fly, a performance that showcased both his physical commitment and his ability to bring humanity to even the strangest of characters. The 1990s cemented his status as a true Hollywood icon, beginning with his unforgettable role as mathematician Ian Malcolm in the blockbuster Jurassic Park, a character he would go on to reprise across multiple sequels in the franchise over the following decades. That same decade also saw him headline the massively successful disaster film Independence Day, further solidifying his reputation as an actor capable of bringing intelligence, humor, and quirky charm to even the biggest budget productions. In the years since, Goldblum has continued working steadily and prolifically, appearing in projects like Thor, Ragnarok, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, and the Disney Plus documentary series The World According to Jeff Goldblum, which allowed him to explore his genuine curiosity about everyday subjects on screen. Beyond his acting career, now let's discuss Eva Longoria, who voices Carol Templeton, Tim's supportive and hardworking wife in the film. Eva Jacqueline Longoria was born on March 15, 1975, in Corpus Christi, Texas, the youngest of 4 sisters in a Mexican-American family that lived on a ranch and instilled in her a strong sense of discipline and family values from an early age. Longoria has spoken openly about facing insecurities during her childhood, recalling how she often felt overlooked or underestimated growing up as the youngest and smallest of her sisters. To help pay for her quinceañera celebration, she worked for several years at a local Wendy's restaurant, an experience she has credited with instilling in her the strong work ethic that would carry her through the early struggles of her career. She pursued higher education at Texas A&M University Kingsville, where she earned a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, the scientific study of human body movement, showing an early interest in fields entirely separate from entertainment. While still a student, she competed in and won the Miss Corpus Christi USA beauty pageant, an experience that helped build her confidence and introduce her to the world of public performance. After graduating, she entered a talent competition that brought her out to Los Angeles, where she was quickly discovered and signed by a theatrical agent, setting her acting career into motion. Her early acting work included roles in daytime television, appearing on soap operas such as The Bold and the Beautiful and The Young and the Restless, where her role as Isabella Branna helped introduce her to television audiences. However, her true breakthrough came in 2004 when she was cast as Gabrielle Solis in the immensely popular primetime drama Desperate Housewives, a role that transformed her almost overnight into a major international star and earned her a Golden Globe nomination along with widespread critical acclaim. Following the massive success of that series, Longoria expanded her career well beyond acting alone, transitioning into directing, producing, and entrepreneurship, eventually directing the critically praised and Oscar-nominated film Flamin' Hot. She has also built a significant reputation as a philanthropist, founding charitable organizations dedicated to supporting children with developmental disabilities and advocating for Latino communities throughout the entertainment industry and beyond, all while continuing to take on prominent acting roles across both film and television well into recent years. Let's move on to Jimmy Kimmel, the beloved comedian and talk show host who lends his voice to the character of Tim and Ted's father in the film. James Christian Kimmel was born on November 13, 1967, in Brooklyn, New York, the eldest of 3 children born to a mother who worked in Italian heritage traditions and a father who held an executive position at IBM. Kimmel was raised in a devout Catholic household and even served as an altar boy during his childhood, before his family relocated to Las Vegas, Nevada, when he was around 9 years old, a move that would expose him to an entirely different cultural environment during his formative teenage years. Inspired heavily by legendary late-night host David Letterman, Kimmel developed an early fascination with broadcasting and began pursuing radio work even while still in high school. He continued this pursuit into his college years, working as a disc jockey at radio stations affiliated with the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and later Arizona State University, though he ultimately left both schools before completing a degree, choosing instead to fully commit himself to a career in radio broadcasting. Over the following years, Kimmel bounced between numerous radio markets across the country, including stints in Seattle, Tampa, and Palm Springs, gradually building his skills and reputation as an entertaining on-air personality. He eventually landed in Los Angeles, where he became known as Jimmy the Sports Guy on the popular KROQ morning program The Kevin and Bean Show, a role he held for several years and one that helped him form a lasting friendship and creative partnership with fellow comedian Adam Carolla. His transition into television began in 1997, when he was cast as the comedic co-host of the Comedy Central game show Win Ben Stein's Money, a pairing that proved unexpectedly successful and earned the duo a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Game Show Hosting. Building on this success, Kimmel and Carolla went on to create and host the popular Comedy Central series The Man Show, further establishing Kimmel's comedic voice and appeal among television audiences. In 2003, Kimmel achieved what would become the defining accomplishment of his career when he launched his own late-night talk show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, on ABC, a program that has since grown into the longest-running late-night talk show in the network's history. Over the following 2 decades, Kimmel has become one of the most recognizable and influential figures in American television, hosting major award ceremonies including both the Academy. Finally, let's take a look at the life of Lisa Kudrow, who voices Janice Templeton, the mother of Tim and Ted in the film. Lisa Valerie Kudrow was born on July 30, 1963, in Encino, California, to a father who worked as a physician specializing in headache research and a mother who worked as a travel agent, growing up as the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class Jewish household. She was raised in the nearby community of Tarzana and attended Taft High School, where she excelled academically and competed at a varsity level in tennis, showing an early competitive streak that would later translate into her determined approach to her acting career. Rather than pursuing performance early on, Kudrow initially set her sights on a career in science, attending Vassar College in New York, where she earned a bachelor's degree in biology with a focus on psychobiology, fully intending to follow in her father's professional footsteps. After graduating, she returned to Los Angeles and spent several years working as a research assistant in her father's medical clinic, contributing to genuine academic research on headache disorders, and seemingly headed toward a career entirely outside of entertainment. However, everything changed when John Lovitz, a childhood friend of her brother who had already found success as a comedian, recognized her natural comedic instincts and encouraged her to audition for the renowned Los Angeles improv troupe The Groundlings. Taking this leap, Kudrow began training and performing alongside future comedy stars, gradually building her skills in sketch comedy and improvisation. Her early television career included small guest appearances and short-lived pilots, including a recurring role on the sitcom Mad About You, where she played a character that would later evolve into the twin sister of the role that made her famous. In 1994, Kudrow was cast as Phoebe Buffy in the sitcom Friends, a role that would define her career and transform her into one of the most beloved comedic actresses in television history. Her portrayal of the eccentric, free-spirited Phoebe earned her an Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress and made her an integral part of one of the most successful television ensembles ever produced. Beyond Friends, Kudrow has continued to build an impressive career, starring in and co-creating the acclaimed mockumentary series The Comeback, as well as the innovative web series turned television show Web Therapy, both of which allowed her to showcase a more nuanced, satirical side of her community. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating real-life journeys of the incredible voice cast behind the Boss Baby family business, from Alec Baldwin's unlikely path from political science student to Hollywood icon, to Lisa Kudrow's remarkable pivot from medical research to comedy legend. If you enjoyed learning about the real stories behind these talented performers, please take a moment to hit that like button, share this video with fellow film fans, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss any of our future deep dives. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. The Boss Baby Family Business, exploring everything from the film's budget and production journey to the many funny, heartfelt, and downright chaotic moments that happened while this movie was being made, because as it turns out, even an animated film about diaper-wearing secret agents has a surprisingly wild story behind its creation. Let's start with the money side of things, because understanding the budget of a film like this really helps put into perspective just how massive an undertaking modern animated features truly are. The Boss Baby Family Business was produced with a total budget of approximately $82 million, a figure that reflects the enormous amount of labor, technology, and artistic talent required to bring a fully computer-animated feature film to life. Unlike live-action movies, where a large portion of the budget often goes toward physical sets, location shooting, and elaborate practical effects, animated films like this one pour the overwhelming majority of their budget into something far less visible to audiences: the thousands upon thousands of hours of skilled animation work required to build every character, every environment, and every subtle facial expression completely from scratch using computer-generated imagery. Every single blink, every strand of hair, every wrinkle in a cartoon suit had to be designed, modeled, textured, rigged, and animated by teams of artists working for months or even years on individual sequences. When the film was finally released, it went on to earn approximately $146 million at the worldwide box office. And while this was certainly a respectable performance for an animated sequel released during an incredibly turbulent period for the entire film industry, it did not quite reach the box office heights of the original 2017 film, which had been a massive global hit, earning well over $500 million worldwide and even received an Academy Award nomination. Despite this more modest box office performance, the film still managed to entertain families around the world and expand the mythology of the Boss Baby universe in some genuinely creative directions. Now, before we dive into the funnier and more personal stories from the production, it's worth understanding just how uniquely difficult the timing of this particular film's creation truly was, because the Boss Baby family business holds the rather unusual distinction of being a movie almost entirely shaped by a global pandemic. According to director Tom McGrath, an enormous portion of the film, something in the neighborhood of 75% of the entire production, was completed while the cast and crew were all working remotely from their own homes rather than gathering together in a traditional animation studio. This was obviously an enormous challenge for an industry that typically thrives on in-person collaboration, with animators, directors, and actors bouncing ideas off each other in real time inside recording booths and animation bullpens. Suddenly, everyone involved in the film had to figure out how to maintain that same creative energy and spontaneity while sitting alone in bedrooms, home offices, and makeshift recording setups scattered across different cities and even different countries. McGrath has spoken candidly about how strange and difficult this transition initially felt, admitting that trying to direct a big-budget animated feature from home for well over a year was a genuinely unfamiliar and challenging experience for someone who had spent decades working inside the traditional studio system. However, out of this incredibly difficult situation came one of the most charming and unexpectedly funny behind-the-scenes stories from the entire production. Because so many of the animators were now working from their own houses and apartments rather than commuting into the studio, many of them found themselves surrounded by their own families throughout the entire animation process, including their young children. As it turns out, this accidental arrangement ended up creating one of the most useful test audiences any animated film could possibly ask for. According to McGrath, whenever the daily animation footage, commonly referred to in the industry as dailies, would be reviewed during virtual meetings, the animators' own kids would often wander into the room and start watching right alongside their parents. The director has joked that this turned into a kind of built-in focus group happening organically in real time, explaining that if the animators' children were genuinely laughing at a joke or a sight gag during these home review sessions, the entire creative team took that as a strong signal that the scene was working exactly as intended. There is something wonderfully fitting about a movie centered entirely around family, childhood, and the bond between siblings ending up being partially shaped by real children laughing at jokes from the next room while their animator parents tried to finish a shot for a major studio film. Speaking of family influence on the production, director Tom McGrath has also shared some genuinely touching and personal details about how his own life experiences shaped the emotional core of this story, which adds an extra layer of meaning to some of the film's funnier and more heartfelt sequences. McGrath has explained that while the very first Boss Baby film functioned almost like a personal love letter to his own brother, this sequel carries a bit of inspiration from his relationship with his sister as well, with pieces of her personality woven into the character of baby Tina. He has also spoken about the interesting parallel between his own life and the story of the Templeton brothers, noting that his own sibling had children at a relatively young age and became a devoted parent, while McGrath himself pursued a demanding career as an animator and filmmaker without starting a family of his own until much later in life. He has admitted with a great deal of honesty that there was a strange mutual envy that existed between the two of them for years, with his brother sometimes wishing he had been free to chase his creative dreams the way McGrath did, while McGrath himself sometimes wished he had experienced the grounding, chaotic joy of raising a family the way his brother had. This genuine, lived experience of two siblings drifting into very different adult lives while quietly envying pieces of each other's paths is clearly reflected in the relationship between Tim and Ted throughout the film, and it adds a wonderfully authentic emotional layer underneath all of the film's comedic chase sequences and spy gadgets. Now let's talk about what might be the single most entertaining aspect of the entire production process, the recording sessions themselves, which McGrath has described in vivid detail as something closer to workshopping a live theatrical play than a traditional voice acting session. Rather than simply handing actors a finished script and asking them to read their lines exactly as written, the creative team behind this film embraced a much looser, more collaborative, and frankly much funnier process. McGrath has explained that the recording sessions would often begin with one actor, and the schedule would then move sequentially through the rest of the cast, with each performer building on what the previous actor had contributed. He described a process where he might spend an entire month recording sessions with Alec Baldwin, during which the two of them would experiment and play around with the dialogue together, allowing Baldwin to throw in his own improvised lines and alternate phrasings. Once those new additions were locked into an updated version of the script, the team would then bring in Jeff Goldblum, who would inevitably add his own distinctively quirky spin to his scenes, contributing his own improvised flourishes that only he could deliver in quite the same way. From there, the material would move to Amy Sedaris, who would layer in her own unique brand of unpredictable, slightly unhinged comedic energy, adding even more improvised material into the mix. This entire process would repeat itself over and over throughout what ultimately became roughly 2.5 years of production, with each actor essentially riffing off contributions from actors they may never have even been in the same room with, creating a strange but wonderfully effective long-distance comedic collaboration where the goal, according to McGrath, was always to make every single scene feel as spontaneous and alive as possible, even though it had actually been carefully built up piece by piece over an extended period of time. This improvisational approach led to some genuinely delightful moments captured directly within the recording booth, and the actors themselves have spoken about just how much fun and how much freedom they were given throughout the process. Amy Sedaris, who took on the role of Baby Tina, has described her approach to recording her lines in a wonderfully personal and heartfelt way, sharing that throughout her time in the booth she found herself thinking about her own godchildren, essentially recording every single line as though she were performing directly for them. This kind of personal emotional anchor helped her bring an incredibly genuine warmth and playful energy to a character who spends much of the film delivering wildly outlandish spy dialogue while still being, fundamentally, an adorable baby. Alec Baldwin, meanwhile, has spoken with what sounds like genuine pride and affection about this particular film within his broader filmography, going so far as to say that he considers himself more proud of this movie than nearly any other project he has ever worked on throughout his entire career. A remarkably strong statement coming from an actor with such an extensive and celebrated body of work across film and television. Jeff Goldblum's involvement in the recording process deserves its own lengthy discussion, because by nearly every account from critics, reviewers, and the filmmakers themselves, Goldblum brought an almost uncontainable burst of chaotic comedic energy to his sessions as the film's antagonist, the mysterious and secretly infantile Dr. Owen Armstrong. Multiple critics reviewing the film specifically singled out Goldblum's performance as one of the most purely entertaining elements of the entire movie, with one reviewer memorably describing his work as an actor essentially doing his own uniquely Goldblum thing, a kind of gentle self-parody of his own well-known quirky screen persona that audiences have grown to love across decades of film roles. That same reviewer noted that the entire film seemed to visibly perk up and gain extra comedic energy every single time Goldblum's character appeared on screen, suggesting that his recording sessions were likely filled with exactly the kind of loose, improvisational, slightly unpredictable energy that has defined his acting career going all the way back to his early collaborations with directors like Robert Altman. Director McGrath himself has praised the entire ensemble cast for bringing what he described as tremendous imagination to their performances, specifically highlighting how much joy he personally took from watching his actors transform a line on the page into something either hilariously funny or unexpectedly heartfelt through small, subtle vocal adjustments that could completely change the tone and impact of a single piece of dialogue. It's also worth taking a moment to discuss how genuinely unusual and challenging it must have been to assemble an entirely new voice cast alongside returning cast members while working under such disjointed pandemic-era conditions. James Marsden joined the franchise for this sequel, stepping into the role of the now adult Tim Templeton after the character had previously been voiced by Tobey Maguire in the original film, meaning Marsden essentially had to establish an entirely new adult voice for a character audiences already had some familiarity with. All while never once being in the same physical room as his on-screen brother Alec Baldwin during much of the recording process due to the constraints of remote production. Similarly, Eva Longoria joined the cast as Carol, Tim's supportive wife, marking her voice acting debut within this particular franchise, while young actress Ariana Greenblatt took on the role of Tabitha, a part that required her to convincingly portray a brilliant, driven 7-year-old character navigating some genuinely complex emotional material about growing up too quickly. All while she herself was still a young performer working through the unusual logistics of remote recording during a global health crisis early by DreamWorks Animation's team, but the studio also brought in additional support from Jellyfish Pictures, a production partner that helped provide crucial extra animation assets and resources needed to keep the film on track despite the disruptions caused by remote work. This marked the second time DreamWorks Animation had leaned on outside assistance in this way, following a similar collaboration on another one of their projects, and it speaks to just how unusual the circumstances surrounding this film's production really were. Coordinating animation work across multiple studios, multiple countries, and multiple home offices simultaneously, all while trying to maintain a single consistent visual style and tone throughout the entire film, was an enormous logistical challenge that the production team had to solve essentially in real time as the pandemic unfolded around them. The film's journey to theaters was itself something of a roller coaster, and this scheduling chaos actually became one of the more amusing behind-the-scenes footnotes of the entire production. The Boss Baby Family Business was originally scheduled to premiere on March 26, 2021, a date that made sense within the normal rhythm of animated family film releases. However, as the pandemic continued to disrupt the entire theatrical exhibition industry, the studio made the decision to push the release back significantly, first eyeing a September 17, 2021 date as theaters around the world struggled with capacity restrictions and shifting audience habits. Then, in a further twist, Universal Pictures decided to move the release date forward again, ultimately settling on July 2, 2021, meaning the film's release date had essentially been shuffled backward and forward multiple times before finally landing on its actual premiere. This constant back and forth was emblematic of just how unpredictable the entire film industry had become during this period, with studios essentially having to make educated guesses about when audiences would feel comfortable returning to movie theaters in meaningful numbers. Ultimately, the film became notable for another reason entirely, as it marked the very first time a movie from Universal Pictures was released simultaneously in theaters and on the Peacock streaming platform on the exact same day. A hybrid release strategy that reflected just how much the pandemic had permanently reshaped the relationship between theatrical releases and home streaming across the entire industry. There is also a wonderfully playful little detail hidden within the film itself that speaks to the kind of good-natured, inside joke humor the animation team clearly enjoyed weaving into their work. During one of the film's energetic chase sequences, eagle-eyed viewers can spot a background character sitting inside a movie theater watching Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, an earlier DreamWorks Animation film. This small detail was actually intended as a clever nod to Spirit Untamed, another DreamWorks project that was originally expected to be released after The Boss Baby Family Business hit theaters. However, due to the same kind of pandemic-related scheduling chaos that affected so many films during this period, Spirit Untamed actually ended up being released before this movie instead, turning what was meant to be a forward-looking reference into an unexpected little irony that only the most dedicated fans and animation trivia enthusiasts would ever notice or appreciate. Let's also take a moment to appreciate some of the genuinely funny material that made it directly into the finished film, much of which reportedly grew out of those loose, improvisational recording sessions described earlier. One of the most memorable comedic sequences in the entire movie involves baby Tina crafting an elaborate fake voicemail message using recorded snippets of Tim's own voice, stitching together fragments in a way that convincingly, if hilariously, fools Ted into rushing over to the house in a panic. The sequence plays out with a wonderfully absurd escalating logic, as Tim tries increasingly desperate explanations for why he supposedly left such a strange message, at one point suggesting he must have been talking in his sleep, and in an even more ridiculous twist, suggesting he might have somehow triggered his phone's recording function using an entirely different part of his body altogether. This kind of escalating, slightly unhinged comedic logic feels exactly like the product of a room full of talented improvisers building on each other's ideas, layering absurdity upon absurdity until the joke reaches a peak of pure silliness that still somehow makes emotional sense within the scene. Similarly, the sequences set inside the disciplinary chamber known as the box contains some wonderfully dark comedic touches, including an unsettlingly cheerful automated voice system that announces timeouts and delivers oddly robotic comfort to crying children. A small but memorable detail that adds a layer of satirical humor about modern institutional childcare underneath all the film's more broadly silly spy comedy elements. The film's climactic action sequence, which involves Tabitha and Tina using an explosive combination of Mentos candy and soda to destroy Dr. Armstrong's server room, also deserves special mention as one of the most creatively fun sequences the animation team clearly had a blast bringing to life. Anyone familiar with the genuinely explosive chemical reaction that occurs when Mentos candies are dropped into carbonated soda knows exactly the kind of chaotic, foamy, rapid-fire visual spectacle this sequence was drawing inspiration from. And translating that real-world science experiment into a fully animated action set piece required the visual effects team to carefully choreograph an enormous amount of simulated liquid, foam, and debris effects, all while keeping the sequence feeling fun, kid-friendly, and visually satisfying rather than genuinely frightening or overly chaotic for younger viewers in the audience. It's also worth discussing the collaborative relationship between director Tom McGrath and legendary composer Hans Zimmer, who returned once again to score this sequel after having composed the music for the original film. According to McGrath, Zimmer approached the emotional through-line of the brothers' relationship by crafting a specific musical theme representing their bond, one that was deliberately constructed by blending together two separate musical ideas that had each represented the brothers individually earlier in the story. McGrath has described the experience of recording this particular theme with a live orchestra as something genuinely moving, explaining that members of the orchestra themselves were reportedly emotionally affected by the music even without seeing the actual footage it was intended to accompany. A testament to just how powerfully Zimmer's composition managed to capture the emotional core of the film purely through sound. McGrath has praised this ability as one of Zimmer's greatest gifts as a composer, noting his skill at underscoring a story's emotional beats without ever feeling manipulative or heavy-handed, something that becomes especially important in a family film that needs to balance broad comedy with genuine emotional weight. Now, let's turn our attention to some of the funnier casting-related stories and details that emerged throughout the film's development. When DreamWorks Animation first announced the expanded voice cast for the sequel, the studio and its producers spoke with obvious enthusiasm and excitement about assembling such a talented and eclectic ensemble of performers. Producer Jeff Herman specifically praised the newly added cast members for bringing tremendous depth, wit, and charm to the project, while also crediting them with expanding the world of the original film in exciting and unexpected new directions. This kind of collaborative, mutual admiration between the cast and the filmmaking team seems to have genuinely permeated the entire production, based on how consistently the actors themselves have spoken positively about their experience working on this particular film. Beyond the recording booth stories, There are also some charming details about how various cast members approached researching or connecting with their characters in ways that added extra authenticity to their performances. Given that James Marsden was tasked with voicing a character who is fundamentally defined by his identity as a devoted, imaginative stay-at-home father, it's worth noting that Marsden himself has spoken in various interviews throughout his career about his own experiences raising children. And bringing that kind of lived-in parental perspective to a character whose entire arc revolves around balancing childlike wonder with real-world parental responsibility likely added a layer of genuine, emotional truth to his vocal performance that audiences may not consciously notice but almost certainly feel while watching the film. The overall tone that emerges from nearly every interview conducted with the cast and crew of this film is one of genuine warmth, creative freedom, and mutual respect among everyone involved in the production, despite the enormous logistical challenges created by having to make an entire big-budget animated feature during one of the most disruptive periods in modern entertainment industry history. Director Tom McGrath has repeatedly emphasized how emotionally connected the entire crew felt to this particular project, noting that even while working in isolation from their own homes, animators, editors, sound designers, and every other member of the production team poured an enormous amount of personal dedication into making sure the finished film felt worthy of the big screen experience. Even though so much of it had been assembled from the fragmented, disconnected conditions of remote work spread across countless individual households. There is something genuinely heartwarming about the idea that a film centered so directly around themes of family connection, reconciliation, and the importance of staying close to the people you love ended up being created under circumstances that forced its entire cast and crew to work apart from one another for the better part of 2 years, relying on virtual meetings, recorded video calls, and long-distance creative collaboration to bring this story to life. In a strange way, the very obstacles the production team faced while making this movie mirror the central message of the film itself, proving that even when people are physically separated by circumstances entirely outside of their control, genuine creative connection, humor, and emotional resonance can still shine through when everyone involved remains committed to making something they truly believe in. That brings us to the end of this deep dive into the budget, production challenges, and genuinely funny behind-the-scenes stories from the making of The Boss Baby, Family Business, a film that overcame remote recording sessions, shifting release dates, and unprecedented industry disruption to bring audiences a heartfelt story about brothers rediscovering their bond. If you enjoyed learning about everything that went into bringing this film to life, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with fellow movie fans who would enjoy these behind-the-scenes details, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss any of our future deep dives. The Boss Baby, Family Business, exploring where this strange and wonderful franchise actually came from, what larger cultural currents it taps into, and where it fits within the broader history of both DreamWorks Animation and the American animated family film industry as a whole. To really understand the cultural roots of this film, we have to go all the way back to its literary origins, because the Boss Baby franchise did not begin as a movie idea at all, but rather as a small, quiet picture book. In 2010, author and illustrator Marla Frazee published a children's board book simply titled The Boss Baby, and the premise of that original book was actually a clever, satirical reversal of a very familiar childhood experience: the arrival of a new sibling. Frazee's original book cleverly reframed the anxiety and disruption that older siblings often feel when a new baby enters the household by depicting the new infant as a tiny corporate executive, demanding around-the-clock attention, issuing constant orders to exhausted parents, and generally running the household the way a demanding boss might run an office. This was, at its heart, a gentle piece of satire aimed at capturing something universally recognizable about family life and translating it into the exaggerated, humorous language of corporate business culture, a genre of humor that has a long and rich tradition within American popular culture, stretching back through decades of workplace comedies, business satires, and media that pokes fun at the often absurd. hierarchical, jargon-filled world of corporate America. When DreamWorks Animation acquired the rights to adapt this slim, wordless picture book into a feature-length film, the creative team, led by director Tom McGrath, had to significantly expand and reimagine the concept, ultimately building an entire elaborate spy fiction universe around Frazie's original central joke, complete with a secretive corporate entity known as BabyCorp, rival organizations, espionage missions, and a globe-spanning battle for the balance of parental love and attention. This transformation from a quiet, satirical picture book into a globe-trotting spy comedy franchise says quite a lot about how modern American animated filmmaking often works, taking a small, culturally specific idea and dramatically inflating it into blockbuster spectacle in order to fill a 90-minute runtime and support an ongoing franchise across multiple films and television series. It's also worth situating this film within the much larger historical context of DreamWorks Animation as a studio, because the company's own history plays a significant role in understanding why a film like this one exists in the first place. DreamWorks Animation traces its roots back to DreamWorks SKG, the influential studio founded in 1994 by three towering figures in the entertainment industry: director Steven Spielberg, former Disney studio chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg, and music industry mogul David Geffen. The animation division of this larger studio eventually split off into its own independent public company in 2004, going on to produce some of the most commercially successful and culturally significant animated franchises of the early 21st century, including Shrek, Madagascar, Kung Fu Panda, and How to Train Your Dragon. Interestingly, Tom McGrath, the director behind both Boss Baby films, has deep historical roots within this exact studio, having previously co-directed the original Madagascar film and its sequels, as well as voicing the memorably deadpan penguin character Skipper throughout that entire franchise, before going on to direct the animated comedy Megamind. This means McGrath brought decades of institutional experience with DreamWorks' particular brand of frenetic, pop culture referencing, slightly anarchic comedic style directly into the creation of the Boss Baby franchise, and audiences familiar with the studio's broader output can certainly see stylistic threads connecting Boss Baby back to the visual sensibility and comedic rhythm of these earlier DreamWorks properties. In a significant corporate historical shift, DreamWorks Animation was acquired by NBC Universal, itself a subsidiary of Comcast, in 2016, folding the animation studio into the much larger Universal Pictures family. This corporate acquisition is directly why the Boss Baby family business was distributed by Universal Pictures in 2021, marking a notable shift from the original 2017 film, which had actually been distributed by 20th Century Fox before that earlier distribution arrangement changed. This kind of behind-the-scenes corporate restructuring, while perhaps less exciting than the film's plot itself, actually reflects a much larger historical pattern within the American entertainment industry during this period, as major media conglomerates increasingly consolidated ownership over film studios, streaming platforms, and distribution networks throughout the 2010s and into the 2020s. Speaking of streaming platforms, the release of the Boss Baby family business is itself a genuinely significant historical marker within the broader story of how the entire film industry adapted to the disruptions caused by the global pandemic. As mentioned earlier, this film became the very first Universal Pictures release to premiere simultaneously in movie theaters and on the Peacock streaming platform on the exact same day. This was not a small or incidental detail, but rather a genuinely historic moment reflecting the massive, industry-wide upheaval that traditional theatrical distribution was experiencing at that particular moment in cultural history. Peacock itself was a relatively new streaming service at the time, having only launched to the general public in the summer of 2020, meaning this family film became an early, high-profile test case for how a major traditional film studio might successfully integrate a brand-new streaming platform into its overall distribution strategy. This same period saw numerous other major studios experimenting with similarly disruptive hybrid release strategies, as companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, and Paramount all grappled with the same fundamental question of how to get major theatrical films in front of audiences who remained hesitant to return to crowded indoor movie theaters during an ongoing public health crisis. Looking back on this period from a historical distance, The Boss Baby Family Business stands as one of many data points illustrating just how permanently the pandemic reshaped audience viewing habits and studio distribution strategies. Habits and strategies that in many ways continued to influence the film industry for years afterward, long after the most acute phase of the pandemic had passed. Now let's turn our attention to the cultural themes and social commentary embedded within the film itself, because underneath all of its cartoonish spy antics and slapstick comedy, The Boss Baby Family Business is engaging quite directly with several very real and very recognizable cultural anxieties that were particularly prominent in American society during the late 2010s and early 2020s. One of the most obvious cultural threads running throughout the film is its pointed commentary on what is sometimes referred to as intensive or competitive parenting culture, a broader societal phenomenon in which parents, particularly within certain socioeconomic classes, increasingly feel pressured to enroll their children in elite, highly competitive educational environments from a very young age, often at the expense of unstructured, imaginative childhood play. The film's fictional Acorn Center for Advanced Childhood, an elite academy that pushes young children toward relentless achievement and status anxiety, functions as a fairly clear satirical exaggeration of real-world trends in elite private education and the broader cultural obsession with early childhood academic achievement that has become increasingly prominent among certain segments of American society. Tim's growing worry throughout the film that his daughter Tabitha is losing touch with the simple joys of childhood in favor of relentless achievement and status-seeking behavior taps directly into widespread real-world cultural anxieties about childhood being compressed, accelerated, and commercialized in ways that many parents, educators, and child development experts have voiced genuine concern about throughout the past few decades. Similarly, the film's central storyline about Ted's transformation into a workaholic hedge fund CEO who has essentially sacrificed meaningful family connection in pursuit of professional success taps into another deeply familiar cultural narrative, one concerning the tension between career ambition and family life that has been a persistent theme throughout American popular culture for generations. This particular tension became especially culturally resonant during the specific period this film was produced and released, as the ongoing pandemic had forced millions of families around the world to reevaluate their relationship with work, career ambition, and time spent with loved ones in incredibly direct and personal ways. Many critics reviewing the film specifically picked up on this thematic thread, noting how the story's message about reconnecting with family after years of professional focus drift felt particularly resonant given the broader cultural moment during which the film was actually released, a period when countless real families around the world were experiencing their own version of forced reconnection due to lockdowns, remote work arrangements, and a general societal reevaluation of priorities, brought on by an unprecedented global health crisis. It's also worth discussing how the film engages, whether intentionally or not, with broader cultural commentary about corporate culture and executive power more generally. Interestingly, several film critics reviewing the original 2017 Boss Baby movie specifically noted how the image of a demanding, business suit-wearing baby barking corporate orders inadvertently evoked broader cultural conversations happening in American politics and business culture during that particular era, with some critics drawing loose comparisons between the character's brash, demanding personality and the kind of corporate executive persona that was becoming an increasingly prominent part of American political discourse at that time. While this connection was likely more of an incidental cultural resonance than a deliberate, pointed political statement on the part of the filmmakers, it does speak to how broader cultural anxieties surrounding executive power, corporate hierarchy, and business culture were clearly present in the cultural atmosphere surrounding this franchise's development and release. Even if the films themselves remain fundamentally family-friendly, a political entertainment at their core. Let's also spend some time exploring the historical reception of this film within the broader landscape of American film criticism, because the response to The Boss Baby Family Business reveals quite a lot about ongoing cultural conversations regarding the state of modern children's animated entertainment. Critical reception for the film was notably mixed, with many reviewers drawing direct comparisons back to the somewhat divisive reception the original 2017 film had also received. Several critics praised the sequel for actually improving upon certain aspects of the original film's thematic execution, with some reviewers specifically noting that the emotional and thematic material concerning brothers growing apart and a father worrying about his daughter growing up too quickly felt more genuinely affecting and more thoroughly explored than similar themes had been in the somewhat more scattered first installment. Other critics, however, felt that the film leaned too heavily on visual chaos, frenetic pacing, and surreal non sequiturs at the expense of coherent storytelling, with some reviewers going so far as to argue that the film's more bizarre and unexplained plot elements, such as babies piloting large humanoid mech suits, ultimately distracted from rather than enhanced its more sincere emotional through-line about family reconciliation. This particular critical divide, between reviewers who embraced the franchise's willingness to lean fully into surreal, almost psychedelic visual comedy and reviewers who felt this same surrealism undermined the story's more grounded emotional stakes, actually reflects a much broader and ongoing critical conversation happening throughout the modern animated film industry regarding how family films should balance broad, chaotic comedy intended primarily for very young viewers against more sophisticated emotional storytelling intended to also engage older children, teenagers, and accompanying adult viewers. This tension between broad comedy and genuine emotional substance is actually a defining characteristic of DreamWorks Animation's output more broadly throughout its entire history as a studio, and understanding this helps place The Boss Baby Family Business within a much larger historical pattern. From its earliest days, DreamWorks Animation often positioned itself in direct contrast to the more traditionally polished, fairy tale-rooted sensibilities of its chief historical rival, Walt Disney Animation Studios and its sister studio Pixar. Where Disney and Pixar built their reputations on meticulously crafted emotional storytelling and painstakingly refined visual polish, DreamWorks Animation frequently embraced a louder, faster, more irreverent comedic style filled with contemporary pop culture references, celebrity voice casting, and a willingness to prioritize immediate comedic payoff over long-term narrative coherence. This stylistic approach helped define massively successful franchises like Shrek, which built much of its cultural impact on subverting traditional fairy tale conventions through contemporary humor and celebrity voice work, and this same basic creative philosophy can be seen quite clearly running throughout the entire Boss Baby franchise, including this particular sequel. Understanding this broader historical context helps explain why critics who evaluate the film primarily against the more polished emotional storytelling standards associated with Pixar's best work often come away somewhat disappointed, while critics and audiences who approach the film with an understanding of DreamWorks' historically looser, more chaotic comedic sensibility tend to find considerably more to enjoy within its frenetic, pop culture-saturated approach to storytelling. It's also worth exploring the historical trajectory of the Boss Baby franchise as a whole beyond just this single sequel, because the franchise's overall expansion across multiple different media formats reflects a broader historical trend within the modern entertainment industry toward building expansive, multi-platform franchise universes out of even relatively modest original source material. Following the surprising commercial success and, even more surprisingly, the Academy Award nomination for Best Animated Feature earned by the original 2017 film, DreamWorks Animation moved fairly quickly to expand the property well beyond a single theatrical release. This expansion began with an animated television series titled The Boss Baby Back in Business, which premiered on Netflix in 2018 and ran for 4 seasons before concluding in 2020, featuring an entirely different voice cast from the original film, with actor J.P. Carliak taking over voicing duties for the titular character. This franchise expansion continued with additional short-form content, including an interactive special released on Netflix in 2020 that allowed young viewers to make choices influencing the direction of the story. A format that itself reflects a broader historical moment when streaming platforms were actively experimenting with interactive storytelling formats aimed at engaging young audiences in more participatory ways. Following the release of this particular sequel film in 2021, the franchise expanded even further with another animated television series, The Boss Baby, Back in the Crib, which premiered on Netflix in 2022 and ran for 2 seasons, this time featuring Ariana Greenblatt reprising her film role as Tabitha alongside an otherwise mostly new voice cast for the remaining characters. This pattern of expanding a single successful animated film into an ongoing multimedia franchise spanning sequels, television series, and interactive specials across multiple different streaming platforms reflects one of the most historically significant trends within the entertainment industry throughout the 2010s and 2020s. As major studios increasingly sought to maximize the long-term commercial value of successful intellectual property by extending it across as many different platforms and formats as possible, rather than simply allowing a successful film to stand alone as a single, self-contained theatrical release the way major studio films more commonly did in earlier eras of Hollywood history. Let's also discuss the historical significance of the voice cast assembled for this particular film, because the practice of casting well-known celebrity actors in animated voice roles is itself a relatively significant historical development within the broader history of American animation. For much of the earlier 20th century history of animated filmmaking, voice acting was generally handled by dedicated voice performers who specialized specifically in vocal character work, often without receiving significant public credit or recognition for their contributions. However, beginning particularly in the 1990s and accelerating dramatically throughout the 2000s and beyond, major animation studios increasingly began casting well-known film and television stars in prominent voice roles, using their existing celebrity recognition as a significant marketing tool to help sell tickets for animated family films. The Boss Baby franchise fits very clearly within this broader historical pattern, assembling a voice cast filled with recognizable film and television stars including Alec Baldwin, James Marsden, Jeff Goldblum, Eva Longoria, Jimmy Kimmel, and Lisa Kudrow, each of whom brought their own pre-existing public personas and career histories into how audiences perceived and responded to their animated characters. This casting strategy reflects a fundamental shift in how the American animation industry approaches talent acquisition and audience marketing compared to earlier historical eras, prioritizing celebrity name recognition alongside traditional vocal performance skill in ways that have become deeply embedded within the modern animated film industry's standard commercial practices. Finally, let's consider the broader cultural legacy and historical place that this particular film occupies within the larger landscape of early 2020s family entertainment. Released during an incredibly turbulent and historically unusual period for the global film industry, The Boss Baby, Family Business exists as something of a time capsule reflecting the specific anxieties, disruptions, and adaptations that defined family entertainment during the height of the global pandemic recovery period. Its unusual hybrid theatrical and streaming release strategy, its almost entirely remote production process, and its thematic focus on family reconnection after periods of extended separation all reflect the very particular historical moment during which it was conceived, developed, and ultimately released to audiences around the world. While the film may not have achieved the same level of massive commercial success or lasting cultural impact as its predecessor, its existence and the unusual circumstances surrounding its creation offer a genuinely fascinating case study for anyone interested in understanding how the broader entertainment industry adapted, evolved, and continued producing content even during one of the most historically disruptive periods the global film industry has ever experienced. That brings us to the end of this lengthy exploration into the cultural and historical context surrounding The Boss Baby, Family Business, from its origins in a quiet picture book about sibling rivalry, through its place within DreamWorks Animation's broader studio history, to its unique position as a genuine historical marker of pandemic-era filmmaking and distribution. The Boss Baby, family business, the kinds of quiet, almost poetic contradictions that emerge when you look closely at how this film was made, marketed, and received by the world. Perhaps the richest irony surrounding this entire production is baked directly into its very title. The Boss Baby, family business is, at its core, a movie about the importance of physical closeness, reconnection, and shared time between family members who have drifted apart. Yet the film itself was brought into existence under circumstances that forced its own creative family, the directors, animators, editors, and voice actors, into almost total physical separation from one another. As previously discussed, roughly 75% of the entire production took place with cast and crew working from their own individual homes during the height of a global pandemic. Meaning a movie fundamentally about the danger of people growing distant and disconnected from one another was itself assembled by a team who spent the majority of their working relationship being distant and disconnected from one another. There is something almost poetically self-referential about a film whose emotional climax hinges on two brothers reconnecting after years apart, being produced by a director and cast who spent roughly 2 years working through screens rather than sharing a physical room together. Another wonderfully ironic historical wrinkle involves the film's now famous Easter egg tucked into one of its chase sequences, where a background character can briefly be seen sitting inside a movie theater watching Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, an earlier DreamWorks Animation film from the early 2000s. This small visual reference was originally intended by the filmmakers as a clever forward-looking nod to Spirit Untamed, another DreamWorks project that was expected, at the time this joke was written into the script, to be released sometime after The Boss Baby, family business hit theaters. However, due to the very same pandemic-driven scheduling chaos that pushed this film's own release date backward and forward multiple times, Spirit Untamed actually ended up premiering before The Boss Baby, family business instead, completely inverting the intended timeline of the joke. What was meant to function as a playful little preview of an upcoming sibling film instead became, quite by accident, a nostalgic callback to a film that had already been released and, according to several critics and online reviewers, had actually been fairly poorly received by that point. This produced an unusually pointed and entirely unintentional irony, with more than one reviewer noting the strange comedy of a mediocre Boss Baby sequel somehow paying more genuine visual respect and affection to the original animated Spirit film than DreamWorks' own contemporary Spirit sequel had managed to pay it just months earlier. There is also a deeply satisfying structural irony buried within the film's central villain, Dr. Owen Armstrong. As the story eventually reveals, Armstrong is not actually a brilliant adult academic at all, but rather a secretly infantile genius who ran away from his own family many years earlier after deciding he was simply too intelligent to remain under the authority of parents he considered his intellectual inferiors. Armstrong essentially represents an exaggerated, villainous mirror image of Ted Templeton's own character arc throughout the film, another figure who chose ambition, control, and professional achievement over the messier, less glamorous rewards of ordinary family life. The film essentially spends its entire runtime warning audiences about the dangers of exactly the kind of prioritization Armstrong embodies in his most extreme form, only for its own hero, Ted, to be introduced at the very start of the story already having drifted quite far down that very same path himself. By the end of the film, both characters experience a kind of parallel redemption, with Armstrong choosing to abandon his cold, achievement-obsessed lifestyle to return to his real family, echoing Ted's own reconciliation with Tim, making the film's ostensible antagonist function almost as an exaggerated cautionary alternate ending for its own protagonist had he never received Tina's intervention. Speaking of Ted, there is a particularly delicious irony buried within the entire concept of his adult characterization in this sequel. The original 2017 Boss Baby film built its entire central joke around the visual absurdity of an infant dressed in a tiny business suit, barking corporate orders and behaving like an exaggerated caricature of a demanding corporate executive, despite being, quite literally, a baby with no real business experience or authority whatsoever. The humor of that original premise depended entirely on the gap between Ted's infantile physical reality and his outsized executive persona. By the time the sequel rolls around, however, that entire ironic gap has completely collapsed, because Ted has now actually grown up into a genuinely wealthy, genuinely powerful hedge fund CEO, meaning the joke of the tiny baby playing dress-up as a corporate boss has been entirely literalized into an actual, unremarkable adult reality. The character essentially grew out of the very irony that made him such a memorable and original comedic figure in the first place, transforming from a surreal visual joke into a fairly conventional, recognizable type of emotionally distant, workaholic businessman that audiences have seen countless times across other films and television shows. There's also a fun, somewhat trivia-driven irony surrounding the casting change for the adult version of Tim Templeton between the two films. In the original 2017 movie, the grown-up version of Tim, seen briefly in the film's framing device, was voiced by Tobey Maguire, an actor whose career is most famously associated with playing the original cinematic Spider-Man. For this sequel, that role was recast with James Marsden, an actor whose own career is most closely associated with playing Cyclops, the frequent rival and love triangle counterpart to Wolverine within the X-Men franchise, a very different corner of the same broader superhero comic book universe. There is a small, pleasantly nerdy irony in the fact that this animated family franchise about baby secret agents happened to pass its lead adult human role from one iconic comic book movie star to another, each associated with entirely different, and within certain corners of fandom culture, sometimes rival franchises, without the change ever being framed or marketed around that particular connection at all. Perhaps one of the most historically layered ironies involving this franchise concerns the corporate journey of its distribution rights. The original 2017 Boss Baby film was distributed theatrically by 20th Century Fox, a studio with a long and storied history stretching back to the earliest decades of Hollywood filmmaking. However, in the years between the release of the first Boss Baby film and the sequel, 20th Century Fox was acquired by the Walt Disney Company in 2019, one of the most significant and closely watched corporate mergers in modern entertainment industry history. Because DreamWorks Animation itself had, separately, already been acquired by NBC Universal back in 2016, this sequel ended up being distributed entirely by Universal Pictures instead, completely severing the franchise's original studio distribution lineage. There is a certain quiet historical irony in the fact that a small, modest franchise about a baby business executive ended up getting swept along by two of the largest and most consequential corporate media acquisitions of the late 2010s. With the studio originally responsible for bringing this baby CEO to the big screen effectively being absorbed into the business empire of one of Hollywood's other major corporate giants before the sequel could even be released. The film's climactic action sequence offers up another wonderfully ironic contrast worth appreciating in detail. Throughout the entire film, audiences are asked to take seriously an elaborate, technologically sophisticated villainous plot involving a globally distributed smartphone application capable of transmitting a mass hypnosis signal to every parent using it, a scheme built around cutting-edge digital technology and mass surveillance-style influence over millions of unsuspecting users. Yet in the end, this entire high-concept, technologically advanced conspiracy is ultimately defeated not through some equally sophisticated counter-technology, but through the classic, extremely low-tech schoolyard science experiment of dropping ordinary Mentos candies into a bottle of soda to create an explosive, foamy chemical reaction capable of physically destroying the villain's server equipment. There's something genuinely delightful about a film so preoccupied with themes of childhood versus adulthood ultimately resolving its most technologically advanced villain plot using nothing more sophisticated than a trick every kid who has ever attended a birthday party or watched an online science video already knows by heart. Even the film's own internal mission structure carries a satisfying twist of dramatic irony that only becomes clear in hindsight. For the vast majority of the movie's runtime, both the audience and the Templeton brothers themselves believe they are engaged in an urgent espionage mission with global stakes, working to infiltrate an elite school and stop a villain's plot to eliminate parental authority worldwide. Yet by the film's conclusion, it's revealed that baby Tina's true, primary objective all along was never really about stopping Dr. Armstrong specifically, but rather about engineering a situation elaborate enough to force her estranged father and uncle back into each other's lives so they could finally reconcile their broken relationship. In other words, audiences spend nearly the entire film invested in high-stakes international espionage stakes that turn out to have functioned, from Tina's perspective, as an elaborate excuse for a family intervention, retroactively recasting almost every prior action sequence as something closer to a very theatrical, very expensive form of sibling relationship counseling. Finally, there's a genuinely striking irony in how the film's box office performance and critical reception compared against its predecessor, particularly when you consider how much larger and more star-studded the sequel's voice cast had become. The original 2017 Boss Baby, despite receiving a fairly mixed and often dismissive critical reception at the time of its release, went on to become a massive worldwide commercial success, eventually earning over $500 million globally and somehow managing to secure an Academy Award nomination for Best Animated Feature. A genuinely surprising achievement for a film built around a fairly juvenile central premise. The sequel, despite expanding its voice cast to include significantly higher wattage stars like Jeff Goldblum and Eva Longoria, despite arguably tightening and improving its central emotional themes according to several critics, and despite benefiting from a much more ambitious and technically accomplished visual style, ultimately earned barely more than a quarter of its predecessor's total box office haul. Several critics even went so far as to argue, somewhat ironically, that this more polished, more thematically focused sequel actually represented a genuine creative improvement over its more chaotic, more critically maligned predecessor, even while acquiring a noticeably smaller box office footprint in return. A reminder that critical improvement and commercial success don't always move in the same direction within the unpredictable, often illogical world of modern franchise filmmaking. That wraps up this lengthy exploration of the many quietly ironic historical details woven throughout the story of the Boss Baby family business, from its accidental Easter egg timeline reversal to its sequel villain mirroring its own hero's flaws, and from its corporate distribution journey through two of Hollywood's biggest mergers to its ultimate irony of a family reunion movie made by a scattered, socially distanced crew. If you enjoyed uncovering all of these hidden layers of irony with us today, please take a moment to hit that like button, share this video with fellow film fans who love this kind of behind-the-scenes detail, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss any of our future deep dives. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.